called Maggie Dixon. Now, Maggie Dixon was a fishwife from Musselburgh. Musselburgh was not far from Edinburgh. It's towards the east of the city. In fact, it's in East Lothian. And Maggie came here to Edinburgh to try and find her fortune. She hoped the streets of Edinburgh were paved with gold. As I mentioned earlier on, they were paved with something entirely different. Now, she wasn't able to find her fortune here in Edinburgh, so she decided to try and head down to London and try and make her fortune there. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to get that far. She only managed to get to a wee town on the Scottish borders called Kilsyth. She was tired, she was hungry, and she knocked on the door of the 10 Bells Inn Tavern there. The landlord opened the door, took pity on her, gave her food and water, and gave her a job as a serving wench in this pub. But the landlord had a son, and Maggie fell for the son, and she fell pregnant. The trouble was, she was already married. And unfortunately, when this baby was born, it tragically died. She wrapped this child in a blanket and hid it under a bush ladder of a tweed to avoid detection from the authorities. Unfortunately, this baby was traced back to her, and she was arrested and taken to the Tolbooth jail and charged with the crime, the act of concealing a pregnancy. The punishment for that crime was hanging. She was taken from the jail down to the gallows in the Grassmarket, placed on a stool. The noose put round her neck, he tightened the noose, they kicked the stool away, and she hung there for 30 minutes until pronounced dead. She was then placed in a coffin on the back of a horse and cart and taken to the pauper's grave in Musselburgh, near to where she lived. On that journey, the cart driver heard a rattling coming from the back of the cart. He stopped his cargo of coffins, and as he approached, all of a sudden, one of the coffin lids popped open and Maggie Dixon sat bolt upright, screaming her head off. She had survived the hanging. This had never happened before. The cart driver didn't know what to do. So after a few whiskies to steady his nerves, he brought her back to the Tolbooth jail and let the authorities decide what her fate should be. They thought this was a miracle, an act of God that Maggie should survive the hanging. Who were they to argue with God that this should be Maggie's destiny? So, they gave her a pardon. She got back with her husband, had 2 further children, and lived to the ripe old age of 86. She opened a pub in the Grassmarket, opposite the gallows where she was hung. It was called, ironically, Lucky's. They've changed the name now. It's actually now called Maggie Dixon's Bar. So if you get a chance later, go down to the bar, get a wee dram, a wee whiskey or a wee iron brew, and raise a glass to the memory of Maggie Dixon. Or to give her a nickname, Hoff Hingit Maggie. Because she went around